Hello and welcome to another edition of the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show, where this week we're super excited to have the head football coach at Mesquite High School, Coach Jesse Hart, on the show. We're going to get into, as we kind of approach into the season here, we're going to start talking about practice planning, different things like that. A lot of times guys are pretty set on their scheme, I think, as they get out of spring ball into the summer, into those opening weeks. But I always think you can create an advantage on how you practice, your organization of practice and things. So we're going to try to talk with as many coaches during the season to get ideas on practice planning. I have felt in season, those are the tweaks that I've been able to add that I think added value to our team as opposed to maybe schematically, because most of us have a pretty good idea of our personnel and what we think is going to work and ways we're going to attack schematically, because we've had months and months to think about it. But sometimes an idea practice planning wise can really jolt some stuff there. So we're going to talk to Coach about that. Before we do that, though, I want to take a moment to remind everybody the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show is brought to you by School Funder. School Funder, the only online fundraising company in America that lets you keep all of the money your team raises. Coaches all across the country always willingly give away 20 to even 30% of their proceeds in fundraising when they don't have to. All you got to do is call the good people at School Funder and you can keep it all. And I'm not talking out of both ends of my mouth. We've used School Funder the last couple of years and we kept everything. And if you're wondering how that's possible, they got a little tip feature on there, so they end up getting it. But all of the money that you're getting from people bringing in goes directly to your program. So I'd encourage you to contact them at schoolfundr.org and let them know that the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show sent you. You can also contact Mr. John Thoralt on Twitter. He's on there. So get a hold of him. Let him know it sent you, as it'll help the show while you're helping the show. Our viewership has been climbing. Definitely tough to get those subscriptions sometimes. We've been climbing in that area as well. So please, right now, hit subscribe. I am not sending you any emails. You're not getting any spam. All you're going to get is an update on when we have a new episode, and we drop our new episodes every single Wednesday, no matter what, even in season. If it's a 10-minute clip on one little film thing, we will always have an episode on Wednesdays. Our off-season episodes do tend to be a little bit more in-depth. So make sure you subscribe right now so you get all that stuff. Well, Coach, I was really excited to have somebody in the 4A level in Arizona. I love 4A football in Arizona now, and I know the AIA takes a beating on a lot of issues. But one of the reasons I like 4A football with what they've done in the last few years is there is a lot of really good football teams in 4A. I wouldn't say there are any destination schools. And what I mean by that is us in Northern Arizona, there's a lot of good football teams. There's nobody, I think, probably at both our schools that we feel like is going to beat us just getting off the bus, which previous years when Saguaro and maybe South Point Catholic and some of those were still in 4A, not discrediting any of the fine teams in 4A, but quite frankly, they were going to have a really, really difficult time winning that football game. And now I think 4A, I legitimately, and Micah Mountains won the last two, but I legitimately thought there was 8 or 9, 10 teams in the 24-team tournament last year that could have made the finals, and it wouldn't have blown me away. So I think that's a pretty cool thing about 4A football. One of my favorite parts of the show is hearing everybody's football story. So take a little bit of time and tell us your football story, please, Coach.
All right. Well, I'm actually a local kid here. I played high school ball at Dobson High School back in the 90s. After that, went to Dixie College in St. George, Utah, which is now Utah Tech University, and then had an opportunity to play a year up at NAU. And then kind of after that, went into the corporate world, kind of lost sight of what I really wanted to do was to be a coach. And then I was given a golden opportunity to come be the JV O-line and D-line coach for Mesa Mountain View. Started in that, realized real quick this is what I wanted to do. Left my job, went back, got a master's in education so I could be a teacher, and then kind of just got going from there. Went over to Combs High School. When that school was first getting open, I was the DC there for a year, assistant coach for a year, and then I took over as the head coach for 4 years there. Had a great run, made the playoffs 3 out of the 4 years. After that, wanted to get back into Mason, wanted to get into that 6A football, so I went over to Westwood High School as a defensive coordinator there for 3 years. Had a great time, learned a ton under Coach Kyle Ide there. And then a huge opportunity to go to Florence High School opened up. Went out there, and it was an unbelievable run. Was there for 3 years, made the playoffs all 3 years. We're region champs my last 2 years there. There's something really cool about small town ball, and it was great. Unfortunately, it was just about 55 to 65 minutes away from my house. So opportunity arose here at Mesquite High School. Always liked Mesquite High School. It's right down the street from me. And so I applied for the job, got the head job, and we just finished our first year this past season. Little bit of a turnaround there as well. Made the playoffs, 5-5 in the regular season, and now we're just gearing up here for year 2.
Yeah, obviously you guys did a fantastic job. I got to watch a little bit of your playoff battle with a really, really good, solid Coconino team. They're in our region, so we get to battle the Coconino Panthers year in, year out basis. Cromer Stadium, where I believe you guys played that stadium, I think, in my opinion, is the second most picturesque stadium in Arizona, with the first always going to be for me with the backdrop of Thumb Butte being right here at Bill Shepard Field for Prescott. But pretty cool setting there for some ball, and you guys certainly did a good job. I saw some film on you. I was really, really impressed. Have followed some of the other stops as well. But Coach, we're going to talk a little bit about practice planning here. But before we get into practice planning, a couple quick questions here. I always like to ask whenever I have head coaches on, ask them a few things about this. You've had different stops at different areas. My question to you is, have you brought the same system to each area, or have you kind of waited, each school I should say, or have you kind of waited to see your personnel, tweaked it that way? Because there's two ways to look at this, and I think the popular answer is the guys that say we match our scheme always to our personnel. And I think that's good. I think your scheme should be flexible enough you could do that. However, if you're a wing T coach, and even if you have great air raid personnel, I'm not necessarily sure that you putting the air raid in, if you're the one calling it, is going to be that successful. So my question is, at each stop, have you kind of tweaked an existing system, or have you overhauled the system to fit the kids? How have you gone about that process?
So I've always coached the defensive side of the ball. So, we've kind of tried to keep some of our base principles, but definitely have had to adjust based off of, guys we got. This past season, I probably blitzed more than I've ever blitzed in my whole entire career as a defensive coordinator. We just needed to do that to get the movement that we needed, with our team, and, had some success with it. We basically have kind of tried to stay in an even front as much as possible. Our defense will kind of adjust based off of what the personnel is showing us, what the formations are showing us. But for the most part, we've kind of tried to keep our principles in place. Our philosophy is, we want our best players to play defense first, and unless they're our starting quarterback, then they're going to play quarterback. But for the most part, we try to keep our defense kind of going the same way. But again, we'll adjust, how aggressive we're going to be, whether we're going to play more man or more zone. Again, that's going to depend on our personnel and honestly what we're going to see each week.
Coach, that leads me right into my next question that I always love asking head coaches. Being a defensive guy, and this answer has kind of been all over the place, I believe maybe you have some strength background as well, but what are the most important pieces you felt in hiring your staff? A lot of guys, if they're a defensive guy, have said an offensive guy. A lot of guys, if they're an offensive guy, have said a defensive guy. Some guys have gone that lower level route. Some guys have gone line, DBs, freshman coach. A lot of different answers on this one. So I'd be curious yours. When you were filling out your staff at any of the stops, what did you feel was the most important hire to make first?
So we try to make everything program-wise the same. So obviously, finding an offensive coordinator is the number one hire that we try to do. We're real lucky with Steve Berg, brought him over. Because I really empower my coaches, especially my offensive coaches. You're running half of our team, and so it's important that we find a coordinator that's going to put in the system, is going to make sure that it's understandable for our players. And then we'll kind of fill in our assistants after that. Obviously, the second most important hire is your freshman head coach. That's the first impression that your guys get. We've got a great one here in Alan Smith that he's really involved in the community and being around our youth program and really trying to get kids to come here. So for me, it's hiring an offensive coordinator, because I've always called the defensive side of the ball, and then after that, it's trying to find a really solid freshman head coach.
Love that answer, Coach. And since we're both in 4A in Arizona, and you had sent out a survey that I definitely filled out, I wanted to get your thoughts on this, because what you sent out, those of you, if you're not in this state, you can probably sympathize with similar rules. In Arizona, at 4A level, they have a 5-quarter rule, which means you get 5 quarters a week. A lot of schools, Arizona, about 7-8 years ago, I'm thinking now, went from freshman teams to frosh soft teams. I personally do it old school. Our frosh team is all freshmen, which in a lot of ways has led to us getting beat up sometimes by some teams, what I call froshmore teams, which are heavy sophomores. And we've been fortunate, remained with good numbers here and maintained a JV level. But you were trying to get it to 6 quarters. And I actually, when I looked at it, I really liked the idea. And then I was speaking with a good friend of mine, Rod Holmes, the Post and Butte coach, and he brought up a different perspective. He thought it might lead to people maybe abusing that rule more and keeping 2 levels. I liked it because I thought it would lead to more teams being able to have 3 levels. He thought he saw teams maybe abusing that rule, playing a bunch of sophomores in just a froshmore game, and then still being able to have them on the varsity as well. What do you think is the strength of having a 6-quarter rule? I think it's so you can have 3 levels, but I want to hear your thoughts on it.
That's the same with us. It's to have 3 levels, and it's to really get kids playing time. I fully understand some of the concerns on teams abusing it, and that's why I sent that out to start that conversation and have that discussion. But especially for us, it becomes more of an issue of you don't have enough linemen. So it's like I've got enough athletes where I could go 3 teams, but I usually just don't have enough linemen. Or you don't have enough quarterbacks, and I actually read Rod's concern on that, and I can see that, and I think if you're walking out with 65 guys on your frosh team, what do you need to do extra quarters for? But for us, it's more about finding those juniors, getting them playing time. Those guys that they're just not quite ready to be varsity contributors. And so what do you do with them? Right now we have a frosh team and a varsity team, but then I've got a bunch of juniors that I still need to develop, and I want to give them an opportunity to play. I mean, that's the whole point. We want these kids to be able to play. So really, I'm kind of looking at it as a way of not necessarily taking varsity guys and having them go down and play and then turn around and play 4 quarters in the varsity game. It's more about finding a way to get these kids as much playing time as possible, especially when you start looking at some of those juniors that, I just don't have enough guys to make a JV team. And if I pull guys from the frosh team, then I don't have enough guys to make a freshman team. And so you kind of have to make that choice. Are you going to go with a frosh team or a varsity team? And I think if you go 6 quarters, split it up how you want, 4 and 2, 3 and 3, however you want to do it. But I think if you do that, it's just going to give more kids an opportunity to play. It gives more schools that don't have those huge numbers, 150 kids in the program, even 120 kids in the program. It gives the kids an opportunity to play, and that's, I think, what needs to be our main focus point as coaches.
I 100% agree with you, and I admittedly, and I've shared this with some of my guys, even I consider friends, that I was like, Coach, you had 55 kids play in your Froshmore game. Kent Winslow, who was our baseball coach, here forever, won multiple state titles in multiple schools. He went stinking 7-1 one year on our JV, and we had 17 kids on the team. So you don't necessarily have to have a lower level team of 50 to play a game. I've coached in a boatload of 20 versus 20, even 17-18 versus 17-18 teams.
Yeah,
and I always find that interesting, but my reasoning for having 3 levels is exactly as you are. I'm not concerned with their record at the lower level. As many guys that can play as possible, I think, is an advantage for us.
Absolutely.
We have some guys this year. We're fortunate to have some guys returning, but we have a number of guys that are plugging into spots that if we didn't have that JV level last year, they wouldn't have played football because they were juniors. But instead, they started on some JV games and got to play a ton of football, and now are in line for possible varsity starting positions, which to me is the whole point of that level.
Yep.
So anyway, Coach, we're going to get into the topic at hand. We're going to talk practice planning, and I see you got a little bit of a later season, a Tuesday practice plan. You will shut up, and you can take us through that. I'll probably also ask some questions maybe on differences in your maybe spring ball as opposed to fall camp, as opposed to your kind of weekly in-game schedule. So
absolutely. If I can get this technology to work, I can bring up one of those too. But actually, what I brought up here was our Tuesday defensive practice in the first round of the playoffs last year against Coconino. The way we do our practices of the week is our offense goes on Mondays, defense goes on Tuesdays, and then it's a mixture of both on Wednesdays. Obviously doing a little bit of special teams each day, and then doing our run through on Thursday. So this was going into Coconino. You know, when you get into the playoffs, that's when you've got all the film you can possibly get on these guys, and so you're really trying to find a way to get them going. But the way we do our practice plans. We always start off, attendance announcements and film first, and then we go right out and we get right on the field and we go over our install. Kids nowadays, you've got to teach to all their learning styles. So, we start off first on the film, kind of showing it there, talking through, and then we get on the field, kind of line them up as far as here's what we think we're gonna see. Here's what we're trying to do. As far as formation-wise, coverage-wise. And then we get into our warm-up right after that. We always do a dynamic warm-up, just get these guys moving, get them stretched out the way they need to be. And then I follow your typical process of indie, group, into team. And so we'll start off with indie. We kind of, based off of the scheme we were going to do this for this game, we separated our linebackers, our insides for our outsides, just for what we were trying to do to try to defend them. So our D-line, obviously get them on the sled, get them going. We had some work we were doing with our outside linebackers. We were putting a little bit of a different scheme in. You talk about changing up. We changed up our scheme for Coconino. Had our outside linebackers working on the one man, our inside linebackers really working on reading those guards and centers. We were kind of got more into.
You were working counter, I know that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then our DBs, our corners, we always have them working their push drills. We have our safeties working their back pedal drills, and then obviously we got to make sure those DBs are getting off the block. So, again, we're in the season now, so about 15 minutes of that indie, and then, it's now late in the year, so we got to move over to where the lights are at, so we move over to the main field, and then we got in some group. We do our inside run first. Our DBs have quite a bit of indie work that they got to get through, so that gives them time to kind of finish that up. We script out what plays we want to work on. So when you see 40 plays, it's not truly 40. It's more of 20 to this side, 20 to that side. We want to make sure our guys see both sides of it. After that, then we switch into our 7-on-7, and now our D-line gets a little bit of time to do some more work on their own. Again, about 20 plays. 45 minutes because we would go through once with our first group, and then we want to go through again with our second group so everyone's fully prepared. And then we end with some team at the end. By this point it's game 11, so we're not trying to trying to bang too hard and hit on each other too much. So we kind of have it just a set 20 plays of work for our team, get us through practice, and then obviously at the end, re-review all of our announcements, and my big thing is making sure our guys always know what's going on throughout the week. So on Monday they know what's going on all the way Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. On Tuesday it just keeps going up and so forth, and just kind of getting them prepared for what's going to happen that week. We had to go up north, so we had to make sure our kids understood it was going to be cold when that game started, and so our boys down here aren't quite used to that. So we wanted to let them know what the temperature was going to be, how to be dressed, and then we just kind of have our standards of how we expect our team to look and things like that, and then just special notes and stuff that we got at the end. And we always make sure that that's up for them. Not only do we go over it, we have it hanging up. I'm not one to really kind of hide practice from the guys. I want them to know kind of what's going to happen, so they do get an opportunity to kind of see this, and we'll make sure we explain it to them as well before we go out there, again, so they kind of know what to be prepared for that day.
So, Coach, I'm assuming at the 4A level you guys have working both sides of the ball. Is this a practice plan that you've had at the 3A and 4A level? Because I think with Combs, Florence, and obviously Mesquite, you've been 3A, 4A level. How would you tweak this if maybe you were at a 6A school? Is there differences, or how do you guys go about that?
If we were to the point where we could truly two platoon, absolutely we would change that. I mean, even at Westwood, we didn't really have the numbers to fully two platoon. That's the goal, but at the same point in time, especially when you get into playoffs, your best players got to play. And so I've been at 3A and 4A pretty much my whole entire career, so we've kind of always kept it separate. Let's just keep a full focus on offense on Monday. Let's keep a full focus on defense on Tuesday, and then let's get into it on Wednesdays. Monday is kind of our install recovery day on offense. We don't need to hit a ton, and so we'll be in shells on Mondays, just kind of get the pads off their legs, give them an opportunity to continue to get their legs underneath them. Tuesday has always been our real hard hitting day. That's when we go full pads. We do it on a defensive day. A lot of times in the season we're doing tackling circuits, and things like that. So Tuesday's kind of our real hard hit day. Wednesday, we'll get kind of more focused on some team stuff. We'll run a lot of our first team offense against the best available defense and go back and forth. Make sure our special teams are in line, and if there's special things we need to work on, we'll do that. My offensive coordinator, Coach Berg, does a real good job of situational stuff on Wednesdays, and we'll kind of do the same thing on the defensive side. And then obviously Thursday we're getting the pads off of them, we're getting the legs back underneath them. We don't do walkthroughs, we do run-throughs. We don't ever want it to be a walk. Try and keep that tempo up, and then roll into Friday nights.
Coach, I love it. Let me ask you this. I'm always curious, particularly teams at the 4A level. How do you guys go about your kids getting the lifting? You have football class during the day, in the morning? Not at all. I mean, there's obviously at the 4A level. At this point, I think most schools have a football class, but how does that work at Mesquite?
Yeah, so we're very blessed. Our administration is great and really allows us. So we've got a varsity first hour class, and then we've got a frosh freshman sophomore second hour class. And so I used to be old school, and because that's just how it was when I played. And it used to be that Saturday, that was the hard lift day. And then I went to a coach's clinic, and I think it was a strength coach for the University of Kentucky, and he's like, okay, so your guys have just gone through 40 to 60 car wrecks, and now you want them to go out there and lift as hard as they possibly can the very next day. He said, do you want to do that? And I said, that makes sense. So we eliminated that. We try to do more recovery and get them treatment on Saturdays, and then Mondays and Tuesdays are our lift days. We were practicing in the evening, so we would lift first hour and second hour, both on Mondays and Tuesdays, and then Wednesdays and Thursdays it's back to more film. Wednesdays we would always do it's a shorter day for us, so that's our opportunity to kind of really stretch them out, get their flexibility, get that lactic acid out of them. And then obviously Thursday it's just watching film, and then Friday we just let them hang out and relax and just soak it in, sit in with their jerseys on Friday at school, and just kind of get mentally prepared for the game that night.
Love it, Coach, and obviously I think that's a huge thing. Your administration has to be committed to have a football program at a high level, no question about it. We're also very fortunate here. We have it, at the end of the day, we have our freshman 6th and our varsity 7th, which, either way I think is can be really, really I don't even know if I want to say valuable. I think it's almost a necessity to compete on a high level at the 4A, 5A, and obviously definitely at the 6A level. But, Coach, let me ask you this. So how does this differ from maybe a fall camp perspective and even from a spring ball? And for those of you that are not familiar, one of the things I love, we have coaches from all across the country on. I love hearing how other states do spring ball. I would love if Arizona would ever get to the point where we could put the shoulder pads on. I really don't think guys would use it to overhit. I, as a line guy, would just be using it to actually get a fit on a guy and be able to do those type of things. But how does your maybe spring tie into your fall camp, even your summer camp? Because I'm sure, do you guys go away to camp, or how do you guys those? If you want to take us maybe through, even if you can't get it up, get the screen up for it, just how do those practices differ?
So, obviously, you're the farther you get into the season, a little more advanced you are with what you're doing. We just got done with spring ball. This is year 2 for us of spring ball. So, my first year of spring ball, with Mesquite, it was about setting the standards and expectation, and really making sure that they understood that, us as a coaching staff, we're not going to let you get away with it. You got to do it right, you got to do it correct, and so we start off really trying to install discipline into them, striving for perfection, knowing perfection's probably not possible, but always striving for that. And so honestly, when we first start spring ball, we won't even get through the warm up and the quickness drills in 2.5 hours. And it's because if it's not right, we're going back. If it's not right, we're going back. And once we've gotten that established and they've shown us on the field that, they're doing it the correct way, then we can start moving into some more advanced stuff. And so we keep it pretty similar. Our ND, we've got our everyday drills, and we want to make sure those guys are doing it every single day, repetition, repetition, repetition. So we kind of follow a pretty similar pattern the whole entire time. We start off with our meetings. We start off with our dynamics. We do a quickness drill we call 6 cones. It just gets them moving. And then same thing. We'll get into our indie. We'll get into our group, and we'll get into our team. Obviously you've got to adjust it, because like you said, we don't have the pads. It would be great. I agree with you 100%. It'd be wonderful. When I talk to my friends across the country, and they're like, yeah, we were in full pads for spring. It's, man, you guys are so lucky. We'll get through spring ball, doing the best we can, end it with a showcase. And then, we get into summertime, and we go super early in the morning. We get them in and get them out. We're 5 a.m. to 8 a.m., Monday through Thursday. Same thing. We'll start off out on the field. We'll do our warm-ups. We'll do our 6 cones, and then again, Mondays are our offense, Tuesdays are defense, Wednesdays are offense, Thursdays are defense, and we'll try and do as many of our drills as we possibly can, keeping them safe, and then we do that for a few weeks, about 3 weeks, and then we go to camp. Last year we went up to Mogollon High School in Heber, Arizona. Doing the same thing this year. Great camp up there. We like to get them up there. There's some beautiful mountains we can run those guys up on. We do kind of some things that a lot of teams are starting to see now. We pull their cell phone from them. They don't get those cell phones all day and all night. They get it for an hour to call mom at the end of the evening. But really trying to kind of get them together and have to talk to each other. And our thing is if they've got enough energy to stay up all night on their phone, then we didn't work them hard enough that day. So we need to make sure we're pushing it. But we try to stay as consistent as possible in how we're doing things, just so our kids are just kind of used to that. Again, you adjust, and your intensity level changes based off of what part of the season you're in. But for the most part, we're going to try to keep it as consistent as we possibly can. So our guys just, they know what the expectation is, and they know how it's going to be that day.
Coach, another thing I love talking to head coaches about, and something that I think has gotten a little more At the high school level, and obviously you played collegiately and have a lot of experience, how many, and we'll talk about this from a defense perspective because you've been on that side of the ball, how many fronts, blitzes, and more importantly, how many coverages do you carry? How many coverages do you think the average high school football team can carry and do well? I think there's a lot of discussion on disguise, and I'll be honest, some of the best teams we played, I've known what coverage they were in on every snap,
Right.
but they did it really well. So I'm curious to hear your perspective.
So we will have up to 6 or 7 different coverages that we'll have in for that week. We run what we call an auto defense, and so our coverage is going to kind of be based off of what we've seen as far as the front. We have some coverages that we'll have it look like one type of coverage and then switch it over to another. We've done a little bit of backside you've got this, front side you've got that. But for the most part, we're kind of like what you're talking about. Everyone kind of knows how we're going to line up and what we're going to do. Our thing is just from a defensive side is get lined up, take care of your responsibility, and fly to the football. And so as far as fronts, we're a base 4-man front. I've had some times where I've been in a 6-man front. I've had some times where I get into an odd front. Again, for us, it's based more off of what that offense is showing us that week. But for the most part, we stay pretty consistent in what we're doing. Again, with I kind of have that KISS philosophy. Keep it simple, and just make sure our kids are lined up, know what they got to do, and then just fly to the ball.
Next question, Coach, and I love having a defensive guy on because in my experience, you will get the offensive guys that'll throw the visor on and the stuff. They'll come on and talk ball. The defensive guys appear, in my estimation, to maybe be a little more guarded. I have always joked with my defensive guys, they're the smartest guys on staff because there's so many things the offense can do and you have to adjust to it and different things like that. So I think our defensive guys are always really, really smart. So my next question would be in terms of installation. This answer has been so far in every area you can imagine. But when you're installing it in the spring, in the summer, in the fall camp, how many days would you say, and I'm not saying it's perfect or whatever, that's a continual process throughout the season, but how many days would you say it takes to install your entire defense?
We take it pretty slow because, again, our focus is really on, we want the intensity level and we want the sprinting to the football. And so we will not throw a whole bunch of stuff in there. We'll gradually put it in. Right now getting through spring ball, we've got one front in and we've got 3 different coverages in. When we get into summer, obviously you start doing passing league and things like that. So we're going to ramp that up, and we'll start that right in June. But generally, as far as on the defensive side, we just want to make sure we're getting lined up. We want to make sure that we understand what our gap responsibility is, and then we just want to see the full-on team effort of sprinting to the football. And so that's more of our focus. And then again, when we get into the summer, that's when we're going to start adding a lot more of our coverages. Front wise, we're not even going to really start worrying about that until fall. When we go up to camp, we've got a couple of rules in place of how our fronts have got to change based off of what that formation is. So we make sure that's installed. So I'd say we've got maybe 3 fronts that we'll put up in camp. But again, everything's based off of what we're seeing from the offense. And so I would say probably by the time we get done with camp, we've got probably about 3. We've got pretty much everything in by the time we get done with camp. Have most of our blitzes in. And then obviously after that, when you get into the season, we'll kind of change things week to week based off of what we think is going to give us the best opportunity to beat that team that week.
The next question, Coach, because we've done both of these. We've been typically an odd front team, and we've based this a little bit on our personnel. If we felt like we were strong in the interior, we're maybe a box/force team trying to bring it into the teeth of the defense. We felt like we were a little undersized, but we could run a little bit. maybe we're spilling everything. Is that something that's remained consistent with you, or is that something you'll look at season to season to see what best suits your team?
Philosophy-wise, we're trying to keep it the same. But, again, what makes people good coaches is adjusting what you're doing based off of what your personnel is. Philosophy-wise, we kind of have what we want to do. We're kind of the same way. We want to spill everything to the outside and bring it back in. Again, we've adjusted. This year at Mesquite, I've done more adjusting as a defensive coordinator than I think I've ever really done before in the past, which has been a great challenge. Before I got to Mesquite, we pretty much stayed in a 4-3 and ran our 3 or 4 to 5 coverages and a lot of zone and didn't really blitz. But this year, the teams we went against, we were in an unbelievable conference. We went against top-notch teams all week, and so we had to make adjustments. And so that's things that we'll try to do, to give us that best opportunity to win.
Absolutely. Last question, Coach, and then we'll let you get out of here. But how do you guys treat 7-on-7? You a big tournament team every weekend? You what I call friendlies where you can stop, coach it up? That's one of the things that I think in my time in coaching has evolved or maybe devolved, depending upon your view on it. And I'm not even going to give an opinion on it, but what do you guys want out of 7-on-7, and how do you go about scheduling 7-on-7?
So we're actually going to do a little bit of both. So we tried about once a week. We want to get with the group, 4 or 5 teams, and it's just teaching opportunities. So we're running our stuff, and hey coach, stop for a second, let's coach that thing up. We'll do it on Thursdays. This year we're going to be heading over to Campo Verde every Thursday, and we've got some big time schools that are going to be there. We're going to compete against, but it's just about us getting prepared and getting ready. At the same time too, we're going to go to that big ASU one as well, and go in there and try and win it. So we want to do a little bit of both. We want it to be an opportunity to teach, for them to get better, for us to see how they compete. But then we also want to, we want to try to go to win something as well. So we're going to do a little bit of both this year. And in the past, I've been just, let's get together with some teams, let's get some work in, and let's just be done with it and move on to the actual season. But this year, we want to give our guys an opportunity to go against some big time schools and really have to go out there and compete. So got a little bit of both that we're going to do this summer.
All right, love it, Coach. Well, I can't thank you enough. I really enjoyed this. Like I said, I love hearing people's perspective on practice, how they go about organizing it. I think, as in anything, the secret sauce, so to speak, is in the details. Details to everything, and obviously you can tell you guys are extremely detail-oriented in installing your system and your fundamentals and all those type of things. So we really appreciate your time, and we will see everybody next time for another edition of the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show.
All right, appreciate you.